5 days after Brad Simpson was charged with the murder of his wife, Suzanne Simpson, we are getting our first look at the arrest warrant affidavit. 8 pages of narrative laying out the case that investigators have spent the past month building against Brad Simpson, a collection of interviews, cell phone data, receipts, and perhaps most crucially, surveillance photos, surveillance video, documenting Brad Simpson's whereabouts and activities and the hours and days following the disappearance of Suzanne Simpson. Joining us now to discuss the main takeaways from this arrest warrant affidavit are Mariah Medina and Jordan Elder, two reporters who have been on this case from the very beginning. Jordan, I'll start with you. You've had a chance to read all 9 pages of this affidavit. What are your takeaways from this?
My main takeaway is a lot of the questions that we had in the lead up about what makes investigators believe that Suzanne Simpson is dead. A lot of those questions get answered in this affidavit, and it also really fills out the timeline that we've been trying to piece together over the last few weeks as well. So a lot of these details, everything about this is interesting, but that's what was most interesting to me, is piecing together that timeline of when she went missing and what happened from there.
I mean, we're talking minutes, hours that are now accounted for. She disappears Sunday night, Sunday evening, but all the way through the middle of the night on into the next morning and into the early morning of Monday, October 7th. We now know a lot of what Brad Simpson was up to, according to law enforcement.
Right. And something that this affidavit is revealing is that law enforcement really did know a lot more than they were letting on last month. Just a week after a lot of the surveillance video was obtained, just days after she had disappeared, some even a week after she had disappeared, really just paints this picture that law enforcement really had a lot going on behind the scenes that we didn't necessarily know about. This was initially sealed, and it's worth noting, Robert, that last week we had emailed the judge that had authorized this warrant asking for clarification after we had learned that there was potentially grounds for the release of this affidavit. And I emailed Friday, I emailed yesterday, and I emailed today. I even called the judge's office minutes after we had called. The warrant was unsealed.
Sure.
So it appears as if perhaps maybe the authority for sealing the warrant perhaps didn't exist initially.
Perhaps. Well, we're going to spend the next 15 to 20 minutes walking you, the viewers, through the key points of this timeline, as Jordan, you were referring to. And I would just put out there, I would posit that what you're going to see is the surveillance video really painting the picture at about 5 or 6 key locations: an HEB in Ole Miss Park, the school where he dropped off his 5-year-old daughter, a Whataburger, a Home Depot, a dump site or a waste facility in Kendall County in Bernie, and a gas station in Bernie, combined with interviews along the way that really let us know, according to law enforcement, what Brad Simpson was up to. How about contradictions? Anything we learned in terms of when they first initially asked Brad, hey, where is Suzanne, on the evening of Sunday, October 6th, after that confrontation at the Argyle Club? He initially says what? The last time he saw her alive was Sunday night.
When he tells, we find out in this document that he had told police that he peeked in on Monday morning and saw her sleeping.
On a second time. So initially he tells responding officers,
the second time.
Last time I saw my wife alive was Sunday night, around 11 o'clock. He then the next morning speaks with the police chief, Fidel Villegas of Ole Miss Park Police Department, and says, well, actually, I saw her Sunday night, but I also saw her Monday morning around 6:30.
I peeked in and I saw her sleeping.
So that's a contradiction right there that we initially see that kind of raises concern from law enforcement that there's not a consistent story being told. How about the cell phone cycling on and off? What's that all about?
So it says in the affidavit that he kept turning his phone on and off, but something very interesting is that the law enforcement officer who wrote this warrant up indicates that he turned his phone on lockdown mode. Now, having sent this to a few individuals in law enforcement as well as in the legal world, they had to Google what that was as well. But apparently it's a feature on an iPhone that prohibits certain applications from being downloaded, essentially makes it so that your phone is a lot harder to be attacked. Be attacked by any sort of tracking. But a feature of that is that it doesn't necessarily track your whereabouts. Something that we've learned from, true crime podcasts and things like this is just because your phone is off or on airplane mode doesn't mean that it's stopped tracking you or stopped collecting data about your whereabouts. And so this lockdown mode, I believe the investigator notes that it's rare to see that an individual would actively put their phone in this. Yes, so it says,
in a manner rarely seen.
right, in a manner rarely seen, referred to as lockdown mode. FBI forensic examiners define lockdown mode as a shutdown of a cell phone done by a person who wants to avoid detection. So this is more than simply turning your phone on and off.
And Jordan or Mariah, either one of you can take
Mhm.
this. Another early contradiction was what happened to Suzanne's cell phone.
And we learn a lot more about that in here. So we actually find out at 9:15 p.m. Suzanne Simpson called a family friend, says, "I'm coming over to your house."
This is after the fight at the Argyle.
Yes. And then she calls that friend, says, "I'm on my way." Then she calls her mother and reports that Brad Simpson has assaulted her and gives details on that.
About an 8-minute conversation that starts at
Yes.
9:16.
And so then we learn that Suzanne Simpson's cell phone carrier reports that her device was suspended at approximately 9:16 at the request of the subscriber. So law enforcement believes that it was Brad Simpson that called the carrier and said, "Cut off her phone."
Which contradicted his initial statement to law enforcement that she lost it coming home from
Mhm.
HEB. She was at an HEB. She somehow lost her phone at the HEB. And somehow she's making calls to her mom after that.
Right. Well,
And-
sometimes on Wi-Fi, like you can still do that stuff, especially with iPhones. And then we find out also that her phone was popping up at home at their house at about
Mhm.
10:22 as well. So she had gone to that friend's house. She had come back, and that is when I think things escalated further.
Because the family has the Find My iPhone feature. The
Yes.
children, the siblings, and the parents use it to locate
Right.
each other. They contact the 20-year-old daughter of the family and say, "Hey,
Mhm.
when was the last time you see the Find My iPhone feature with your mom, Suzanne?" She says, I believe it was around 10:22 on
Mhm.
Sunday night. She took a screenshot of it, shared it with investigators, and said, "This was the last time my mom's phone was active at her house at 10:22 on Sunday night."
That's right. And so something that we also learned from this affidavit is the, I guess, the levels of control that Brad Simpson apparently
Came to light through interviews with family and people who had been in contact via cell
right.
phone.
Right,
Text
that,
messages
that
that
he
were
had
shared.
exercised over Suzanne, including one individual telling law enforcement that Brad Simpson would often take Suzanne's phone and whenever they would get into arguments, and then their 5-year-old child, telling, I guess, somebody at the daycare that Brad Simpson had taken his mother's phone and because they were fighting and turned it off, which also contradicts.
That she lost it at HEB.
Right.
Right.
And also, I believe friends had told law enforcement that this was a common theme, that she lost her phone. She'd have to tell her children that she lost her phone, and when in fact Brad had taken it from her.
Right, right. And something that is just very eerie, and it's a pattern that I've seen across various cases that unfortunately result in death that deal with domestic violence. Is that friends and close ones, loved ones of these individuals often tell police, they said, if I go missing, it was
This person.
or if I disappear, look here. And in the affidavit we see that an individual that I believe handled Suzanne's finances had told
Her
investigators,
personal banker.
right, that Suzanne told her that if she ever disappears, to look in a lake.
Mm-hmm.
What a
that-
heartbreaking thing to even anticipate.
right.
And to share with a banker who you wouldn't typically, I feel like, share things like that with.
Right. And but I do also, something that I see a lot of in the comments is, where were the neighbors? Where were people in the community? The friends knew. But what you see a lot of in this affidavit is that they came forward with information. A lot of this case is built upon the testimony and information provided by close friends and family of Suzanne Simpson. Domestic violence is a very, very complicated thing to navigate, especially as somebody, on the outside of this. So those at home that are wondering, where were these people? They were there, and she confided in them, and they provided her with resources and help.
In fact, Jordan or Mariah, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is the first time we confirmed that Brad was in fact not the first person to report her missing. It was a close friend at 9:57 who called police, urged Brad to, didn't get the sense that he would. So she herself calls police and says, Suzanne is unaccounted for. It was then at 10:11, some 14 minutes later, that Brad calls the police chief of Olmus Park and says, I haven't seen my wife. So it was at the urging of others. If you're not going to call, we will.
Right.
We didn't know that until now. That's another detail that comes to light with this affidavit.
Right, definitely. And you had mentioned earlier just how minute by minute we're learning his whereabouts. Something that stood out to me was the use of flock security cameras. These have become so popular amongst private companies, HOAs, and even law enforcement uses them. So they're basically license plate readers. These cameras were able to detect Brad's license plate at various locations. That's how I believe they learned that he was at the Home Depot. Brad paid cash at the Home Depot. What did he buy?
How about we walk everybody through the
I
that's
feel
where
like
you
we're
were
getting a
going,
little ahead of
Robert.
ourselves.
We'll start with around 11 o'clock on Sunday night. That is the last time that neighbor witnesses the fight in front of the Simpson household, the attempt by Brad to restrain his wife. They then get out of view of the neighbor, but that is when he sees a physical altercation. That's what initially leads to his arrest on domestic violence charges. Now we're in the middle of the night. Now we're the next morning. Around 7:50, I believe, is when Brad is spotted on surveillance video dropping his 5-year-old daughter off at the Early Childhood Education Center. And we're starting to get a glimpse into what's in the back of the bed of his truck.
And it's so eerie when you think about it. He, in this video, drops his child off at school, and in the back of his truck, it details that you see trash bags and what appears to be a large ice chest. So investigators flag that. They continue through his day.
He's about to have a busy morning after dropping off his child.
So
multiple stops.
After he drops the child off at school, then he goes to a Whataburger and
To get some food. He's hungry.
To get some food. It says he does use his debit card here. And then they observe these items in the truck bed: 3 white trash bags, a large gray heavy-duty trash can, an ice chest, a large bulky item wrapped and secured in a blue tarp with a silver in color metal firewood rack placed on top of the blue tarp in a manner to conceal and weigh the tarp down.
Now, what does the affiant believe? The person writing this affidavit, what do they believe that means?
They believe that he's trying to avoid people detecting whatever is in that tarp.
In fact, he goes on to explicitly say that he believes there is an unknown object concealed within the blue tarp due to its shape and size and it being secured by a strap rope. In the person writing this opinion, training and experience in past investigations, he is aware that criminals will commonly conceal, transport, or disguise their victims in a manner described above to purposefully avoid detection by law enforcement. So that is seen in the surveillance video where he pays by debit card at Whataburger.
But he doesn't stop there.
Where does he
go
he keeps going.
Yeah.
So Jenny's asking, what are the new developments? Jenny, and for those just tuning in, we are currently going through the timeline. So
Suzanne disappears October 6th in the late hours of the evening after being witnessed in a confrontation with her husband by a neighbor. That's the last time she's seen alive. We're now Monday morning. Hours later, he has just dropped off their child at school, making a stop at Whataburger to get some food, pays with a debit card, and in the back of the truck, we're starting to see the evolution of the contents at the back of his truck. What was it at the Whataburger at this point? What have we seen?
So at the Whataburger, so at the school, backing up, at the school, they see that there are trash bags and an ice chest. I believe they probably got a better view through cameras at the Whataburger, knowing that there is a firewood rack holding down a tarp. At that point is when the investigator says, from his experience or their experience, you can say that in this method, usually criminals would be trying to hide their victim because of what they're seeing in his truck at Whataburger.
That's 9:12 a.m., a Whataburger in Bernie, Kendall County. Then fast forward about 30 to 40 minutes. He's still in Bernie. Now he's at a Home Depot.
Yes. And he purchases 2 bags of cement, an orange Home Depot construction bucket, a box of 32-count heavy-duty trash bags, a 30-ounce Clorox disinfectant spray, and insect repellent.
Now he's going to come into contact with a complete stranger who law enforcement manages to track down. Seen in surveillance video in the parking lot, Brad Simpson walks up to a man and starts a conversation. Well, police want to know, well, who is this man he's talking to and what are they talking about? What do we find out when they track down that man, that stranger? They say Brad Simpson randomly comes up to him and asks what?
For instructions or directions rather to the nearest dump site. And that is in Kendall County. Shortly after purchasing all these things, mind you, which he paid for with cash.
And they
What
found the
does that
receipt.
imply
They
that
found
he
a
pays with
receipt.
cash?
And right. And they found the receipt, and that's how they were able to find out what he had purchased. And then not only this, we've mentioned that the phone use was very key.
He needs directions, but he doesn't want to use his phone for those directions.
Right. And so he turns his cell phone off, I believe.
And it says,
during
though,
this
that that guy,
interaction.
that random guy he walks up to, he says, can I use your cell phone to pull up the directions to the dump, to the site, so that I can dump off these belongings? And yeah, right? So he doesn't want his phone to be tracked looking up directions to a dump site.
Right.
So he asks the stranger, can I use your phone for these directions? So that's yet another attempt. But he uses his debit card to buy the food at a Whataburger in Kendall County, which would be hard to explain if they were to track that, but maybe he didn't think they would want to look at his cash records and his debit card transactions at that point. He wasn't fully thinking it through. So he goes to the dump site. They find some businesses nearby that have surveillance cameras.
Right. And it shows even more about this, what are the contents of the truck bed. Jordan, if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. So after he visits this dump site in Kendall County, he pulls up to a gas station. And then in that surveillance video, he does use a debit card to get gas and then purchased water with cash. So he pays for gas with the card, but water in cash. And then at that point, the white trash bags are now missing from the truck, but the blue tarp, the firewood rack, and the trash can are still there. And then it says, this is interesting to me, it says defendant changed footwear from black sandals into dark-colored cowboy-styled boots.
It's now 11:15 a.m. at this gas station in Kendall County. This is it's in Bernie. He's already visited the Kendall County solid waste site. And so he goes from the Whataburger to the Home Depot to the Kendall County solid waste site. And now he's at this gas station. It's 11:15 a.m. A solid 2.5 hours have elapsed since he dropped off his child at school. He's been busy. And he's been tracked pretty much every step of the way.
Yes. And if you want to read through this with us, we have a redacted version of this on our website if you're wanting to see all of this for yourself as well. I'm a visual person. I would want to be reading through this with us as well.
So if you're his defense attorney right now, it doesn't look great. I mean, these aren't the activities of a normal Monday morning, especially the Monday morning after your wife went missing.
That's interesting that you mentioned that. I have sent this to a number of criminal defense attorneys, and one had said, I don't see any evidence of murder at all in there. He bought some things at Home Depot, period. And to me, that struck me as interesting from that perspective, from the legal or criminal defense perspective.
Beyond a reasonable doubt, what will a jury be able to hear? What will they be able to, weigh and consider?
Right.
I mean, we're on YouTube right now. We're reading an arrest warrant affidavit. It doesn't look great. I mean, it's not ideal for your client to have had these activities on camera to be seen doing all of this. But you're saying a defense attorney looks at this and says, well, why are you charging him with murder? Where's the body? Where's the murder weapon? What's the murder that took place here?
Right. And something that we see is that there's obviously no evidence. They say that there's no evidence of Suzanne being alive since her disappearance was first reported, but other individuals have said just because there's no evidence, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Well, I guess we're growing our crew here. Yami Virgen joining us now on the set as this discussion unfolds.
Yeah.
If you had a chance to look over the arrest warrant affidavit or the fact that it's been unsealed, what are your takeaways? What's your reaction after reading all this?
My takeaway also after working the phones, that's why I'm late. This is a clear message to the defense attorney on the part of law enforcement that we are serious. Your case is in trouble right now. You better talk. And you better cut a deal now because these kids deserve to know where their mother is. I don't think anyone that's working the case, any law enforcement agents, believe that Suzanne is out there alive. I mean, just everything. Even when you look at in the notes where he has the last will and testament, where he's talking about also what he did to her. I think it's very damning. And
We haven't actually mentioned that yet.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
found on his phone a
well,
reference to a
yeah.
previous 2023 event where he had
Right.
abused
Well,
her.
So let's keep going through the
Okay.
timeline so
So-
that we can.
So we've established that he goes to the Kendall County waste site. He then
Mhm.
goes to the gas station, but the data on his truck shows another path that he continues towards Bandera and Medina County, continuing that cycle of shutting his phone off, shutting it back on, turning it back on, cycling on and off to try to avoid detection or
Correct.
the ability to download, collect
Mhm.
data from his cell phone,
Yeah.
as it were. But that they saw, once again, more surveillance video that shows now the blue tarp is gone. Now that rack, what was it referred to? The rack was repositioned.
The firewood.
Firewood rack has been repositioned in the back of the truck. So
Mm.
all of this, all the contents of the back of his truck is
Yeah.
getting bigger and then getting smaller, getting repositioned. This is now 1:15 in the afternoon on Monday. So this hours have gone by at this
Mhm.
point.
They say that he was in Medina in Bandera County for only 13 minutes. So he's headed to Kendall County. He's in Kendall County and he's in Bandera County for only 13 minutes before heading back.
The
to-
town of Medina in Bandera County. That's where I was a little
Correct.
confused, right?
Correct.
Just to get that straight. You're right. Okay.
But there's also a part when they're talking about at some point, I know you guys are going through the timeline. I'm just thinking in my head from everything I read and all the conversations I've had in the last hour, there's a part when they're talking about how concerned they were when they arrived and there was a fire pit. Have
Yeah.
you guys talked
No, we
about
have
the
not
fire
Not
gotten
pit?
there
yet.
Okay, let's
So-
get
so-
One more
let's
thing
get
really
to
quick
those
before we
things.
get to that, because this is kind of eerie. We mentioned how he dropped off the 5-year-old daughter at Howard at 7:50 in the morning. Well, he's picked back up on surveillance video at
Mhm.
Howard at 3:27. They get a look inside the back of his truck, and now they see, like I said, the blue tarp is gone, the metal firewood rack is gone, but the bed does have that ice chest and a large gray heavy-duty trash can, both visible inside the back of the truck. He's picking up his 5-year-old daughter.
Mhm.
potentially after maybe disposing of his wife's body. That is the extremely conscience shocking part, because before he goes and picks up his child from the early childhood center, they say that they obtained surveillance video that shows that the blue tarp is no longer visible and the firewood rack is now repositioned. But then at 3:27, that's when the blue tarp is gone and the metal firewood rack is also gone.
That's
So
at Howard. That's the video we're looking right now. The video
Right.
from our chopper. Then 4 o'clock, 4:07. He's at Bubble Bath car wash.
right.
Time for a car wash.
Yeah, there's splashes of cement in the back of the car.
Yes.
There's a thing of Clorox. He's cleaning. He's seen in the video, I believe, cleaning the front, the driver's side of the vehicle.
Rear left
He's
passenger
seen
side.
cleaning the rear side. There were splashes of blood there. There was also splashes of blood and splashes of cement.
Dried cement splashes were later located in the rear passenger compartment of the vehicle to include in the truck bed. 30-ounce Clorox bottle located within the rear passenger compartment. Truck bed contained only the ice chest with no other items that were observed in previous
Correct.
surveillance videos.
I mean, it's again, he's still presumed innocent until he's found guilty, but this doesn't look good. It does not look good.
Definitely.
And you know what they put on there again, I mean, between all the things that were picked up, the shutting down off the phone, and we had talked about this last week. Your apps will pick up. If you turn something on, the apps will record where you were and when it got picked up. Oh, thank you. Where the apps got picked up, where were you? I know that, like I said, you guys are going through the timeline, but this to me, just reading it, it's just so damning.
All right, so
It is damning.
Jordan, Yami, Mariah, any of you can take this. 3 days later, the 9th of October, law enforcement goes out to that property in Bandera County. That's where they find the ground level burn pit.
That's the property that his father used to own and was recently sold. We believe it was sold to someone within the family. We had looked at that property
Mhm.
before.
Jordan, what did they find in the burn pit?
They find at least 3 cell phones. They find a burnt laptop as well. So lots of burned devices in this pit, and they believe that at least 3 of them belonged to Brad Simpson.
And what does his training and experience tell the person writing this affidavit?
That criminals often engage in destruction of evidence in an effort to impair or hinder a criminal investigation.
And he was, in fact, on top of the domestic violence charges, he was also charged with evidence tampering. So that would be an example in the eyes of law enforcement of tampering with evidence.
And I will be interested to see 3 phones is a lot. I have 2 phones because of the work that we do, but 3 phones. I would be interested to know what all those phones were for.
So page 7, if you want to read this, Mariah, the very top, they get the warrant for Brad Simpson's cell phone. What do they find on the cell phone?
Right. So they have 2 notes within that cell phone that say, or one was titled "This Next Life" and the other was titled "Last Will and Testament," apologizing for physically assaulting Suzanne Simpson one time in August of 2023 and again on the previous Sunday night, which was the 6th of October.
The fight at the Argo.
Right, right. And so these notes were created on October 8th, which was after the alleged assault of Suzanne Simpson and prior to his arrest by the Texas Rangers on the 9th. And something the affidavit also notes is that Brad Simpson was not surprised by his arrest.
Yeah, didn't even ask.
Right. He did not even ask, why am I being arrested? Or, what is the purpose of this questioning? It was just complete lack of surprise. Something that also comes up is during this timeline on the 10th, that Brad Simpson is texting his business partner, James Cotter, who was released from jail last week.
And his bond lowered the same day the murder charge came.
Right, exactly. And oddly enough, when we were outside, we were there for hours just waiting for him to come out of the South Tower like most criminal defendants normally do. And we were informed that, no, he was released to the custody of the Texas Rangers and taken home.
Escorted out of the view of the media.
Out of the view of the media. Now, to me, I don't believe in coincidences, and you never really hear that.
So you're implying maybe there was a little bit of special treatment going on.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes you wonder what was that special treatment in exchange for. I mean, we have to understand also that this affidavit was supposed to be sealed. So it wasn't unsealed until today after repeated emails to the judge that had signed off on the warrant.
Jordan, Mariah earlier referenced Suzanne's personal banker. Can we talk a little bit more about what she revealed?
So we're getting into the part now of the affidavit where they're listing out all of the people that they've talked to in this investigation. And so they bring up Suzanne's personal banker. And apparently Suzanne told this person that Brad would commonly take her phone away. And then it says that the person advised the investigator that Suzanne Simpson said to tell the kids that she had lost her phone when really he had taken it from her, and told the banker, the personal banker, Suzanne Simpson, advised them that if she went missing to look for her in a lake.
Right.
Which is we talked about this a little bit earlier, but that is a huge thing to share with a personal banker or that's a very concerning thing.
Right. And so when investigators served an additional search warrant on October 23rd at their home, they located black trash bags, a gray heavy-duty trash can, the metal firewood rack, and only 28 of the 32 total trash bags were still in the box.
This is the Simpson household.
Right, right. So they had only located one bag of Quikrete, and it makes you wonder, where did the rest of the stuff go? Where were those other trash bags? What are the whereabouts of the contents of these things? And it also sheds light on why investigators were searching that landfill. A lot of people had wondered, why are they searching this landfill? Well, it turns out it's because they got a tip from somebody who had spoken with Brad Simpson and asked for the nearest landfill. A lot of these locations were very intentionally searched after receiving information that perhaps he had disposed of his wife's body there.
Yeah, well, there's not enough water in the lake, so I'm sure he had to get creative if he in fact killed his wife. I mean, all of these things that they have here it's great, you know, evidence, but they still need him to talk. Um, I mean, somebody wants to sit there and read it, you can read it. I mean, it's all on there. Who writes a will? Who writes a will? And the next chapter, you know, and then saying that I shouldn't have gotten mad at her, but then he's driving around town picking up stuff. You know, I mean, we've seen this before. Most people that are watching this right now, I mean, they are going to read this and they're going to come up to the same conclusion, but without evidence that really points him out with that body, it's going to be difficult. That's why we again said we were so surprised when Joe Gonzalez did this. I mean, I have been following a case for 15 years of missing baby Gabriel. We have recordings of the mother. We have recordings of family members saying she killed the child, and they have yet to take her to trial. So why this case?
There are also several references in the affidavit to Brad's demeanor, especially when he was approached by law enforcement and told that he was being placed under arrest. I believe they said he had no reaction, was not surprised. Answered some questions about that alleged assault that took place in the front yard that was witnessed by the neighbor, but then asked for a lawyer when the conversation continued. The implication being that if someone comes up to you and says, hey, you're being placed under arrest, while your wife is missing, that maybe you'll put up a little bit of a fight and say, well, what do you mean? Why am I being placed under arrest?
Well, and my question for you all, with the last will and testament that they found on the phone, to you, does that signal that he might have been planning to take his own life?
Oh, absolutely.
I think he was. And that's, if you keep reading, that's the reason why, you know, they called up in Bandera and asked law enforcement there to go check on him. Well, he was sitting around a campfire.
I thought that they had arrested him on his way back from Kendall County, or in Kendall County. We have put in an open records request with DPS and with the Kendall County Sheriff's Office for any body-worn camera. But from those interactions, DPS has advised us that because it's an open investigation, they're going to send that to the Texas Attorney General's office for a decision. Have not yet heard back from Kendall County, but
yeah, this was interesting. You referenced this, but just to lay it out a little more explicitly, that when they were looking through Brad's cell phone, they found a text message that he had sent to a woman who lives in Longview, Texas, a friend of his, who basically, he apologized. He says, a quote, "I still feel bad about tonight," referencing Sunday night, the confrontation at the Argyle Club that was witnessed by, you know, members of the public. "I never should have grabbed her phone and drove off, but she was so protective of it. My dumb ass didn't know her passcode, so I got locked out, had to bring it back. I really have no interest in looking through her phone and anybody else's. These devices are the devil." So then they reach out to that woman who received this text message, asked for her take on all this. She says, well, she tells the Texas Rangers she was aware that Brad would track. Suzanne Simpson told this friend that Suzanne was aware that Brad would track her and that Brad was, quote, extremely jealous.
Right.
So that's just painting the picture, part of the stew that's kind of coming together.
And you have to wonder, you get into an argument, you go through all of that, and then she went to the person that's quoted on there as being a family friend, whom, according to LinkedIn, works at Frost Bank, and she went to his home. So if you're already in a fight, you know what I mean? She gets back to the house. There was a part on there that talks about a hole in the wall that the housekeeper
indentation
saying,
at the base of the stairwell.
Yes, that wasn't there before. So you got to wonder what happened when she finally came home. The locking of the device, I mean, it's just so much. There is so much there.
And turning off her device before she was even home. That was part of the timeline that we didn't know before that. While she was out at that friend's house, that's when he had her phone shut off. Too.
Yeah, and her daughter is saying, you know, we're on the family. This is where my mom's last location was.
Oh, yes. I share my location with my partner. I share my location with my family. That's something that I share just out of an abundance of caution. But, you know, at the same time, it comes in handy for things like this. I mean, even when Brad had deactivated her cell service, I mean, there's still ways to make phone calls, that, you know, get connected to the internet. It's just really disheartening. A lot of people were getting a lot of questions about the lake. The lake piece comes from Suzanne. So according to the arrest affidavit, Suzanne had told her
In August of
bank.
24, this was a conversation. If I ever go missing, look for me in a lake.
Right. And so people are asking, were any bodies of water searched? And to my knowledge, I don't think any were. But something that Yami had noted is that the bodies of water have very low levels here.
Right now, yeah.
And not only that, the truck GPS data doesn't really align with having visited a body of water. So what they make note of is that Brad is on this path to Kendall County. He's in Medina for 13 minutes, and then he makes a beeline back to Kendall County. So, you know, if I'm a betting woman, I would say that more than likely we're going to have to look in and around Bandera and in Medina.
But we do have to say, I mean, the water is not high enough right now to keep a body down that long. And the amount of cement that he would have used with one bag, I don't think would have been enough to keep a body down in a body of water. But it would be enough if you wanted to keep something hidden in the body of water. So what items have yet to be found that haven't been found that belong to Suzanne?
Yeah.
Well, in fact, to that end, at the very end, so what does this all add up to? The conclusion that the person who wrote this arrest warrant affidavit says they submit probable cause to believe that Brad Simpson intentionally and knowingly caused the death of Suzanne Clark Simpson on or about Sunday, October 6th, 2024, in Olmus Park, Bexar County, Texas. The facts in this affidavit come from my personal observations, my training and experience, and information obtained from other officers. This affidavit is intended to show that there is sufficient probable cause for the requested warrant and does not set forth all my knowledge about this matter, implying that there's more out there.
Yes.
Right. So I just got this message from a longtime law enforcement officer. It says this is all circumstantial evidence. I'm not sure how they got this warrant signed for murder. The warrant clearly shows that it was an abusive marriage, but I don't see how this warrant shows evidence of a murder being committed. Am I missing something? Why would you need bags of cement if you are dumping a body at a waste site? In other words, these same conclusions that are being reached by defense attorneys saying, you know, I just don't see it. You have
There's
a story. You can tell a story, but you almost kind of have to pick what story you're telling.
And as we've seen over the course of the last few weeks, law enforcement's being very selective in what the public can see or what we can see with it. They had all of this days ago when we were asking questions. I'm sure they have more based on the questions.
You know,
we're asking
and
now.
you make a great point. I mean, there's a lot of holes that can be poked. I'm just going to say, from an appearances standpoint, standing by a flaming pile of cell phones the day after my wife went missing and a law enforcement agent walks up to me, not a great look. I might start being a little nervous, might get some butterflies, you know, if someone comes up to me and says, hey, what are you doing?
Right.
I'm just burning my cell phones. Can a guy live? I mean, is that normal? I mean, I don't know.
No, Robert, it is not.
Exactly.
It is not normal. But how far can they go? Yeah, you're burning your cell phones. Are you breaking the law? At that point, they didn't know
No,
that.
it's not a great look, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, it says a Bandera County Sheriff's deputy walks up to him, sees a roaring fire. It says, what's going on? My cell phone's burning, you know?
Well, and they also note that all three cell phones belong to him. It says 3 cell phones belonging to the defendant.
So what about
and the
her?
laptop.
And a laptop.
Right.
What about her phone?
And it makes you wonder, what about her phone? So, you know, in terms of tampering with evidence, is it truly tampering if they're his devices? Like you said, you know, can't a man just burn his cell phones? And I know it sounds ridiculous, but I mean, you have to take into account other cases. For example, like in the Andreen McDonald case, her husband was charged with her murder, but was ultimately convicted of manslaughter, the lesser charge. So even with a body, you know, a jury of his peers did not find that there was enough.
Right. And it was all similar evidence, a lot of stuff in the back of his vehicle, a lot of trash bags, a lot of burning taking place. And that was all after the fact. It was more like it's manslaughter because you can't prove what led up to this murder.
Exactly.
Yeah, he even took the stand. Former Air Force Major Andre McDonald takes the stand and said, I was mad at her after she died because she caused me to get in this fight with her. The fight was an accident. That's why it was manslaughter. But then I hit her bones. I took her out to a rural property. Then I went back and started desecrating her bones because I was so mad at her. But that doesn't imply murder. That just implies desecrating a body.
Correct.
And so, yeah, he's got cement. Yeah, he's got heavy duty trash bags. Yeah, he's asking a stranger in the parking lot of a Home Depot, hey, give me directions to the nearest dump. I mean, sure, that doesn't look great, but that doesn't prove murder, is what these defense attorneys are saying.
Exactly. And even law enforcement. And so to add to that, though, I mean, many of the same circumstances here in the immediate aftermath of Andrine's disappearance. I remember distinctly one of her friends calling the station and telling me, she always told me if she disappears that Andre did it. And, you see all these anecdotes from friends, family, loved ones, and even
she would never abandon her kids. There's been no sign of her since she was missing.
Yeah.
No activity of any sorts.
Exactly. And I think for a lot of these cases, I've done other cases when I was up in Milwaukee. There was one that the woman was being poisoned with antifreeze. And she did tell someone at the bank, and this was a national story, if anything ever happens to me, it was my husband. He was poisoning me. I think most of these people know when things are so bad that they may end up dying. And that's why they start telling the story to people here and there so they can be found later on. I mean, I'm sorry. At this point, if he does know something, his attorney has this. I would love to hear from his attorney. So if you're out there watching, give us a call, because I'm sure right now you have got to be freaking out with this if I'm the attorney.
So defense is saying, hey, they have A, B, and C, but they're not showing how A causes B causes C. So like the final step, number 37, is this is the probable cause to file this warrant. Well, it's number 36, really quick. This is him making the case of like, well, how can you prove murder? Well, he's saying there are no signs of Suzanne Simpson being alive since Brad Simpson physically assaulted her on October 6th. This has been verified by Suzanne Simpson's cell phone records, financial records, family, friends, coworkers. I am aware that no credible tips or information were obtained from the active Texas Clear Alert, and law enforcement has been unable to locate Suzanne Simpson after a large amount of search efforts. However, all family, friends, and coworkers agree the victim would never willingly abandon her children. So he's asking people to read between the lines, but you're saying in a court of law, you can't just read between the lines. You have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt.
Right. If the presumption is I am innocent, I start at innocent. I don't start at guilty. It's the burden of the state to prove that I did what you are saying that I did. And to be charged with murder is that's a pretty substantial thing. I just really quickly, there were two questions that people had. One individual had asked, were there any wounds that may have resulted in a struggle at the time of his initial arrest? Scratches
no
or
references
bruises?
made.
But there is blood. His blood is on the back of that truck. It was already tested. It came back that it was his blood.
Is that a Yami insight? I mean, because I don't believe it specifically
No, it
says that.
on there. It's
Okay.
on there.
Okay.
It says that there was some blood and it was tested by forensics here in San Antonio, and it came back as his blood. It wasn't her blood. So,
Wow.
I mean,
Well, a defense attorney could say he cut himself on the
Yeah.
thorny bushes while he was out.
he was out in Bandera in the
Mhm.
middle of nowhere at their cabin with, the fire
Mhm.
where he
Yeah.
burned himself.
And then another question is there a map of travel that the suspect took that can be published so the public can see and possibly help with the investigation?
We have a lot of web sleuths. This is the part that always, to me, for the last 20 some years is interesting. It's the number of people that are watching tonight and they want to help from home. So,
Well, the key point is it starts at Howard, which is, off Broadway,
yes,
in San Antonio, Alamo Heights, whatever. And so then from there, that's when he makes his way into Kendall County. His first stop is at the Whataburger. I'm not sure how many Whataburgers there are in Bernie, but this is Kendall County. I mean, I think it has the specific address.
yes.
I can work on a map. Yes.
Yeah.
I will.
We
when
can-
That
we
is
get
a
done
Jordan
here, I'll go
Elder
do that.
special.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know if we have the video of the Whataburger. We were showing it earlier, but
We have. I was seeing video that we got the
Yes.
car wash. We got a lot of the key places. So we'll work on a more specific map.
yeah, it was 621 West Bandera Road in Bernie. That's where the Whataburger was. From the Whataburger, he goes to the Home Depot. That's 633 West Bandera Road in Bernie, Kendall County. And from there, he goes to the Kendall County Waste site, which is 46 Spanish Pass Road in Bernie. From there, he goes to the Bernie Valero Stripes gas station. That's at 37101 Frontage Road, Johns Road. Located at Johns Road on 37101 Frontage Road, Bernie, Kendall County, Texas. That's the Valero Stripes. So gas station. And then where does he go from the gas station?
Oh,
That's the Medina.
Oh,
where
that's when he goes to the
for a
Medina.
second.
Yeah, he goes traveling westbound through Bandera County into Medina, Bandera County. So, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I did want to clarify to that question that viewer had regarding whether or not Brad had any injuries. So the affidavit does indicate that he had numerous lacerations and bruises on his hands and arms.
There you go.
During the custodial interview.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, that's the gee whiz. I passed right over that part. Yes, he conducted a custodial interview. This is what day? This is October 8th. This is 2 days. This is the night of October 8th. 2 days after, 2 evenings after the evening of the 6th, when Suzanne was last seen alive.
Right. There's things that are going to stand out to people. The things that are going to stand out are the things probably that they're working on. And they did say on there, they knew we were going to get a hold of this. You're not going to put out your whole playbook, so the public can get it. But Brad and the attorney, if right now, I'm sure they're having conversations. This thing here would tell me that they're asking them to come to the table. Let's do a deal and give your children the peace that they need in the case that he in fact killed his wife or knows where her remains are. So do the right thing and let your children have some peace and mourn their mother.
Brad Simpson, quote, appeared unconcerned about his wife being missing and showed little to no emotion. Invoked his right to counsel after being questioned about the physical altercation that occurred between Brad Simpson and Suzanne Simpson on October 6th. So a lot to go through. We've posted this online. We really appreciate you joining us. This is all a live reaction, very fresh. We got this within the past hour, so we're still going through it ourselves. 5 days after Brad Simpson was arrested and charged with the murder of Suzanne Simpson, we are learning more about the arrest warrant affidavit that led to that charge being filed. Many more details to drop in the days to come. I know you guys will all be over it. So, Yami Virgen, Mariah Medina, Jordan Elder, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Robert Price. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you later.